What is the Chicago Bulls' biggest fear during the 2024 offseason? Bleacher Report asked that question, and we're going to answer it here at Chicago Bulls Central. We're also going to look at how the Chicago Bulls ranked as the 30 best jobs in the NBA, the head coaching jobs, that is. We'll see where they rank that. It's not going to be good. And we're going to look into why 2 weeks away from the draft, it's still as unpredictable as ever. We're going to get to all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And so I want to start off with this. I'm using this as a launching point. Bleacher Report had an article in regards to what is every team's biggest offseason fear. And naturally, on this list, they had for the Chicago Bulls that not finding a trade partner for Zach LaVine. And I would say that is a pretty big fear for the Chicago Bulls, considering what this front office's motivations are this offseason. I know a lot of Bulls fans do think that if Zach LaVine were to come back, it wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing ever. And I kind of sit on the fence somewhere in that. I've come to the realization, though, that this front office is looking to move Zach LaVine basically come hell or high water. Now, you can agree with that or disagree with that, but that does seem the focus of this offseason, that they want to move on from this marriage of Zach LaVine. And for the credit, it seems like Zach LaVine is also open to that, and they're just trying to find the best deal possible. And, you know, we've heard things like the Chicago Bulls have come down off their asking price substantially from what they thought it was going to be at one point, wanting an all-star player back or a promising young player. And we'll see what the Bulls end up getting in the Zach LaVine trade. But I'm going to throw out some things that are actually bigger fears for the Chicago Bulls, or should be bigger fears, in my opinion, other than just not finding a trade partner for Zach LaVine. The first one I'll say is that Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu's growth last season ends up being a mirage. That, to me, would be one of the worst things that happened this offseason from the Chicago Bulls. At the start of the season, if Coby White and Ayo don't look like they are bringing what they left off on, and God forbid they get worse, right? If they stay the same, that's cool. If they don't take another step, I think they showed enough last year to where if that's what they're going to be, maybe can make it more consistent, specifically for Coby White. It's solid enough, right? But if Coby White or Ayo, if this team makes decisions this offseason, bet around the fact that Coby and Ayo have made a step and a leap last offseason, and that ends up being a mirage, and it doesn't end up being something that actually stays consistent this season, that, considering some of the other things we're going to talk about at some point in the show, would be a huge black eye on this front office, not necessarily because of their control, but if you start making moves because you're starting bet on players having certain levels of production and they step back from that, that could be something that can really change the direction of your franchise. That's why when you hear some of the Bulls fans that are fearful of building around Coby, that's where it stems from. He's done it for one season. I still say that Coby White is somebody that you build with. We got to see if he's going to be somebody you can build around. I think he has to take another step as far as consistency and closing out games before you're truly ready to say that. But if they go from being players that you can build with to looking like players that are just role players again, that is a bit of a concern. Now, if the Bulls hit on the draft pick or anything like that, another player makes a step or a leap, maybe that can be mitigated somewhat, but it still should be a fear by this front office of that happening for this group. And so I think that for that reason, I had to put that high on this list for the Chicago Bulls. Another thing that I'm going to put on a biggest fear list is if Andre Drummond does walk away for nothing, right? If he goes away in free agency, which is his right as an unrestricted free agent, if they do not find a replacement backup center, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the draft, if the Bulls do go wing in the draft or whatever, best player available, but Drum leaves and you don't find a competent backup center, considering the slide that Nikola Vucevic is on, that could be huge. And even outside of the slide of Vuce, let's say that Vuce goes back to looking like he looked earlier, right? Let's just say that he's a more efficient player offensively. He keeps his ass in the paint. He doesn't shoot threes, and we actually get a good season next year. Not having a viable backup center option for this team, regardless of however Vuce plays, is something that should be a huge fear because we've been here before. And then we were able at least to operate Derrick Jones Jr. with his 6'11" wingspan as a backup center. The Bulls just don't have that. Are you looking at using Julian Phillips as a small ball center at that point? You do have Adama Sanogo, which I don't want to overlook at all. I do think that Adama Sanogo at least has shown that he deserves an opportunity to show what he can bring at the NBA level. So maybe the Bulls do that. But if then Adama he ends up looking like an undrafted player instead of somebody who can contribute, or if he's just not ready, that could be hugely detrimental to the Chicago Bulls if they don't go center in the draft, Drum walks for nothing, and they go into next season without a viable, at least backup center option. And some Bulls fans, kind of the more pessimistic ones, would say, hey, then you still got Vooch there, who they look at as still a starting caliber center. Don't necessarily share those sentiments, but not having true size on this team has always been a problem. And if you lose Andre Drummond and don't have a viable replacement for him, that becomes even louder for the Chicago Bulls team as far as the lack of size, lack of depth at size across all those positions. And that could be something that you look at and we could go back to and be like, we really let Drum walk for nothing, huh? We really let Drum walk for nothing. And so I just hope that whatever plans the Chicago Bulls have addressing, because we need also some more size at the power forward on top of all of that. But if you lose the size that we do have without a viable replacement, that gets pretty ugly potentially for the Chicago Bulls. And then next up, getting it wrong in the draft. And for a team that's given up a lot of draft capital, getting it wrong yet again in the draft. And I'm not expecting a rookie in this draft to necessarily come right in and to be a dominant player or anything, but you at least want a player. We've taken players so much that we just basically give a red shirt year in the first year. Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu are contrary to that. Dalen Terry, red shirt year the first year in the NBA. Julian Phillips started playing a little bit, but because of injury, it ended up being a red shirt year for Julian Phillips. You have to get a player, I feel like, in this draft that shows you something that they're able to contribute at the NBA level consistently for you, and at least that you're not going into next offseason still wondering if your rookie from this year is even going to have a role on the team. That's something as well that I think should be a big fear for the Chicago Bulls. And you guys, if you've been watching this channel long enough, know I think that this front office has to get, whenever the next 3 picks that they have in the first round, they have to hit on those picks. Now, the hitting on is various levels. I'm not saying that those all 3 picks have to end up being even starting level players, but they have to be players that show something that you can actually use them consistently. That's how you sustain success. You got to start getting drafts right away. And I think that getting it wrong in this draft could be another huge black eye for the Chicago Bulls team in this front office. And then lastly, I'm going to say Patrick Williams restricted free agent. And not necessarily just if he leaves or anything like that. It's a combination of a lot of different things. Whether you overpay him and to get him to end up staying here and don't want him to go sign an offer sheet, and then he ends up still kind of being a question mark, that's a fear. If he does end up signing an offer sheet somewhere else that you can't match, and he ends up going there and he ends up developing, right, and takes like a young Lauri Markkanen, takes the step that we've been waiting to step, should be a huge black eye there. And then the possibility that a combination of the two happen. So it's a Patrick Williams restricted free agency. I don't want to make it seem like it's like this huge question mark, but there's a lot of different scenarios that it can go and it not be favorable for the Bulls. Now, ideally, you would like to see Patrick Williams, because of the injury, because of the questions around him, sign a reasonable deal with the Bulls, end up coming here, maybe a 2-3 year deal, and then he ends up actually growing and then developing like we need him to develop. Already we know what he brings defensively. He started to show some things in December that we should see, but we got to stop seeing flashes, and we got to start seeing a consistent vision of who Patrick Williams is going to be. And I think that Patrick Williams restricted free agency blowing up in the Bulls' face one way or another, stay or leave, has to be another big fear for the Bulls this offseason. So to recap, Bleacher Report on the list had no Zach LaVine trade. I can understand that. I've added Kobe and or Ayo. Their step forward that they took last season ends up being a mirage and not actually who they end up being. That's a big fear. Not too worried about it, but it has to be something in the back of your minds. Drum leaving with no viable backup center replacement or starting caliber center, if that's the case. And then getting it wrong in the draft. And then lastly, Patrick Williams restricted free agency. Let me know what you guys think down below on that. What do you think could be the Bulls' biggest fears this offseason? Let me know that down below. A lot of Bulls fans' biggest fears, though, is Billy Donovan staying on as head coach long-term for the Chicago Bulls, even though we do know he is going to be here for at least 2 more years. Well, his contract runs out 2 more years. If things blow up, maybe the Bulls do look. But CBS Sports recently ranked all 30 head coaching jobs in the NBA, and the Chicago Bulls came in at dead last. And in that, they talked about cheap and poorly managed team and how we also handle our assets. And listen, unfortunately, when you look at the facts, they have a valid reason to say that. When you look at it, the Bulls have consistently waited too long for value zone players. We've talked a lot about here the fact that the New York Knicks offered you still probably the best best offer that we've heard. It was 2 first-round picks. I think one was heavily protected. I can't remember the players at this point. It's been so long now. But the New York Knicks, RJ Barrett, who again has his own flaws, but again, at least you're getting a young player that has shown some promise, right? But a package built around that. The Bulls did not strike on that. It ends up now we're looking to move Zach LaVine, and we're going to get much less than what that offer was. Then DeMar DeRozan's pending offseason. You have made a decision on DeMar DeRozan that now you sit in a position where you're either going to have to overpay or he's going to walk for nothing. And they're at the risk of doing that with Alex Caruso again now as well this year. This Bulls front office has made moves that have just not worked out. And that does make, when you don't trust your front office's ability, yes, their initial spurt of getting Vooch at the trade deadline, then turning around, getting Lonzo, getting DeMar DeRozan, getting Alex Caruso, that showed that they do have the ability to make a string of deals. But you guys know my mindset. Past success doesn't guarantee future success. And you can't even really call that a success based on the fact that we've paid Lonzo to sit more games than to pay him. But this team has gotten worse each 3 of those years. We've overpaid for basically every deal that we've ever made. Lauri Markkanen, we let him walk away. He ended up developing into an all-star talent. Now, I do think most of that damage with Lauri was done before. I think what was the first original ball-headed hoe, the coach that we had, Boylan, that he did a lot of damage to Lauri Markkanen as well. But at the end of the day, the front office has been on the wrong side of deals a lot. You look at what they gave to Zach LaVine, giving him the largest contract in Chicago Bulls history, and now you're turning around looking to sell him, and your trade value and your asking price has actually dropped. That plays a huge part into it as well. And so when you come down to it, the Bulls doesn't seem as of yet what they've done yet. Now, if they go into this offseason and they do make changes, they change the direction of the team, all right, you've proven otherwise. But as of right now, they look to be in the place of making the same mistakes that they made before. Zach LaVine, you couldn't let him walk away for nothing. And are they doing something similar now with DeMar, where they're going to end up paying DeMar $40 million plus for a team that we already know the ceiling? Lauri Markkanen, are they going to repeat that mistake now with Patrick Williams, right? So those type of things that the Bulls have made have continually bit the Bulls in the ass, and that contributes to a ranking like this. And then you look at the fact of developing young talent. This team has not done that. We have not developed. We draft these raw players, and we just have not developed them, whether that's coaching, whether that's offseason work, whatever it is. Kobe and Ayo, yes, based off last year, have given the Bulls best young pieces. But then when you look at it, every other young piece that we have on this team is a huge question mark. Patrick Williams, his level of play is inconsistent. Even if you do like what he shows when he does play, you be remiss to not admit that he is very inconsistent and up and down in what he gives offensively, at least. Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, we just don't know what we have in these guys yet, and we haven't really developed. And now Dalen has, I think, took a step up. He went from looking like a player that was completely uncontrolled to a player that, to me, I can see him, how he can fit in on an NBA roster. But still tons of questions there. Then you look at even some of the young players that we got undraftedly. Adama Sanogo looked great in the G League, but then we had a reluctance to use him in the NBA level, and we don't even know if they plan to. Ernest Batum, a player that was coming in heralded for his shooting, and he actually got worse. Why initially, those first 2 or 3 games looked really good. Fell out of the rotation, actually looked worse. Is that coaching? Is it not putting players in the right position? What is that, right? Another player that we don't quite know what he's going to bring yet. The Bulls don't have stock in young players right now. Usually when you look at some teams that are struggling and look at some teams, you at least look at a player and say, hey, they got something in this guy. Let's see if he can really, if they can uncover it a little bit more, but they potentially have something in it. We got Kobe, we got Ayo, which is still good, right? But the other young players that you've drafted, Kobe, you didn't draft, right? So that's a big question mark on this front office and on this team as well. And then you just look at just what we've done. This Bulls team does not operate like a large market. Chicago is one of the largest markets in the world. And we operate like a small market team so consistently. And then you got to ask yourself this, though, and this is a fair question that was asked in this article. even if Jerry Reinsdorf looked at AK and said today, hey, don't worry about it. Spend as much as you can. Spend as much as you want. Just make sure you get us a team that's going to be able to go. Let's spend as much as you want. Just get us out the first round of the playoffs. Have you seen enough from AK to where you can trust consistently that he's going to make the right decisions to do it? I get it that he made, and I gave him a lot of credit for the team that he initially built. That vision looked like it was going to work. But important, great front offices is how you also pivot off the things that don't work. And that's where this front office has failed so oftenly, is that they have not pivoted right now to move off on it. So it's funny how we talked in the first segment about the biggest fears that we have in this. Maybe one of the biggest fears that we should also have for this team is that AK and Eversley just were one-trick pony. And I'm not saying that that's the case, but I'm saying that that could be and should probably be a fear as well, is that maybe they had that initial spurt. And once that didn't work, that's it. They're taking too long to go back to the drawing board and draw something different up. There is a reasonable question to be asked there. And if maybe the biggest fear is that we just don't have the front office that is going to be able to turn this around. And that is something else that you have to ask yourself. So when you look at the head coaching positions, the head coaching jobs, how desirable it will be for other teams to come here, I do think that we have some promising pieces. I don't think that we're dead last, for example. We haven't nearly operated our team as bad as like the Charlotte Hornets, for example, right? I do think this is a harsh one. But in fairness, even though that this is my favorite team, this is my lifeblood. I live and breathe the Chicago Bulls and Bears and Chicago Sky and White Sox, unfortunately. There's a lot of struggle in that as I'm talking about it. But even though that's what I live as far as sports-wise, I'd be remiss to not understand and act like the job, this position that the Bulls are in right now leaves a lot to be desired. If you're a head coach, for example, and you're looking at the Chicago Bulls, let's just say the Bulls don't have Billy Donovan here, and you're a head coach and you get offered a job by the Chicago Bulls and a different team in the NBA, you would have to look at everything that this team does and ask yourself, do I think that this front office, even if I do like certain players on this roster, do I think that this front office is going to get it done well enough to where I'm going to be able to get what I need for this roster, for my coaching job? And unfortunately, the Chicago Bulls have left that question so up in air that you have to legitimately ask yourself, what are we doing? And I've said it before, this is the last offseason that I'm just giving this front office to show me that they can do something different, that they can start correcting the ship. I'm not expecting everything to be fixed in one offseason. It didn't take one offseason to break everything. But you have to start showing signs that you're starting to get the ship going in the right direction. And if you're not, at that point, I'm not going to ever stop being a Bulls fan. And I'm not saying that AK is going to be fired because of it. But at that point, I'm just looking at you as a loser-ass front office. And that's unfortunately where we sit right now with the Chicago Bulls, where I sit right now. I can't speak for you guys, but where I sit right now with the Chicago Bulls team is just sitting in disappointment. And so hearing that the Bulls rank last on a list like that, it doesn't surprise me. And that is a big enough problem in of itself. You should be surprised when your team is rated dead last in anything. You should be surprised by that. Everybody should, at least as somebody who supports a team, be like, hey, at least we're not going to be last. You can't even have that faith in this front office and in this team. And so I think that all comes along. Not learning from your mistakes, not hitting on draft picks, not developing young talent when you do hit on them. Like, all these things play a part into why the Bulls are what they are. No, it's not just Billy Donovan. No, it's not just the front office. No, it's not just your least favorite player on the team. It's a combination of all those things coming together, or lack thereof coming together, for success, at least in my opinion. But with that said, before we end the show today, I do want to talk a little bit about the draft. The draft is about 2 weeks away, and we still do not really know much in the draft. Like, of course, you're having your speculation. We got our mock drafts. We got all of this. This is why I cover so many prospects that I do, because this can go all over the place. It can for any team in this draft. The uncertainty around this draft right now plays a big part into why you're seeing the large swings. A player like Khalil Ware, for example, one of my favorite players in this draft, was initially in a lot of mocks slated to go in the 20s. Some mocks now have him going in the top 10, right? Because of private workouts, things like this. We still don't know exactly where the Chicago Bulls are going. We don't even know what the Chicago Bulls are really looking for in this draft. Are they just focused on finding their big man of the future, which there are a lot of prospects that could be that in this draft? Are they more focused on going best available, which could still end up being a big man, or it could end up you going a high upside pick Or are they looking for players that can contribute now while they're still looking to keep this version of the team competitive, which like a Donovan Clingan, a Dalton Connect, those type of players will play into that. It's still really up and down. And so, we're going to continue the draft coverage over the next 2 weeks. We'll have a lot of things that go that way, but this is still a very fluid situation for the Chicago Bulls this offseason. We don't know what's going to happen. And anybody who tells you that they know they're lying to you. They're lying to you. I can guarantee you right now, the Bulls don't even know what they're doing right now. They probably have some ideas, but because of how crazy this offseason can be, or this draft can be, even the Bulls have to have a backup plan and a backup plan for your backup plan, because all it takes is one team to be willing to reach, not trade back, but be willing to reach because of how close all the talent is. Like a team at like number 5 with the Detroit Pistons. Yeah, of course, there some people like Reed Shepherd, Stephon Castle are slated to go to them. But who's to say that they don't look at it and say, you know what? Yeah, we draft right here, but we honestly see a player like Jacoby Walter being the best player in this draft, and they go out and get him, right? I'm not saying that that's going to be the case, but all it takes is one thing like that to completely throw a lot of draft boards for loops. On top of Nikola Topic already having the partially torn ACL, we don't know how far he may fall now because of it. This draft is all over the place. And the Bulls just have to try to evaluate it the best that they can and get the talent that is going to help improve this team the most. And let's hope that they can do that. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's because of you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.